What have you seen inside someone's home that made you view them differently? Trick-or-treating as a kid, we were always scared to go to one neighbor's house. The yard, nor home, was well kept. Stories circulated the neighborhood for years that he was a mean man, had killed his family, etc. As a dare, I ran up and rang the doorbell, and as I tried to run away, an older gentleman opened the door. He said, "I don't get many kids nowadays, happy Halloween," and held out a bowl of yummy candy bars. I peeked in, and it was a meticulously kept home on the inside. A little candle lit, neatly folded blankets and magazines next to his lazy boy chair. He was so kind. I believe his kids were grown and had moved away. Wife had passed away years ago. Made me not believe the rumors that get started about people. Comment? I sort of had a neighbor like this. He was an old man, very tall and had long gray hair. The skin on his face was very wrinkled, and all of this made him look like an old hobo. If you've seen Breaking Bad, the old dude running the junkyard looks exactly like him. Anyway, as kids, we would be scared to go near his house, which was an old house, sort of in the middle of an overgrown old forest. The yard had a few old cars rotting away. It was downright scary. One time as a teenager, during winter, I came home from school and noticed that I was missing my keys. I sat on our porch, freezing, and the man came walking by and asked why I was just sitting there, out in the cold. I told him that I had lost my keys. He invited me into his home, and as I didn't want to freeze, I went. Turns out, he was an old fishing boat captain, and he was very, very nice. He made me toast and hot chocolate, and we listened to music on his vintage stereo system. Really weird-looking huge speakers with horns. Never figured out the brand. He had a ton of old and interesting stuff that he had bought on his travels. I had a really good time. The sad plot twists to the story are that his wife had passed away many years before, and he had no children or relatives. He himself passed away a few years later, and his house went vacant for something like 10 years, with all the stuff still in it. But later, someone bought the house and completely restored it. I remember as a middle schooler, everyone thinking our female PE teacher was a lesbian that would spy on us when we showered. The wild thing is that she was married to a man, not saying by default she's 100% straight. All she ever did was encourage us to have fun and enjoy class. I still remember her telling me about her skydiving trip and how freaking cool it was. She made me want to go skydiving at 12. It took about 18 years to actually get the nerve to go, but she was absolutely correct in describing her experience. I hate how kids can be crapheads without even fully realizing how cruel their behavior can be, at least not until later. Story 2. A girl I hung out with in college had me over to study together. We didn't have dorms, we lived close enough to just walk to college, so it was at her house. I saw this little colorful urn on her TV stand and I said, "Oh, that's a pretty pot." She got this really sad smile and replied, "Thanks, that's my daughter." I felt so bad. Comment? On a somewhat related note, I was checking a customer in at my work. They were dropping off a laptop to have it repaired. I recognized the last name, and I said, "Are you any relation to Steve? I haven't heard from him in a couple of years. How's he doing?" She suddenly changed her demeanor entirely, got really silent, and said, "He was my son. He died 2 years ago." I felt horrible that I had dredged that up for her, and I felt even worse that I had no idea the guy even died. What really ducked me up, though, was that I learned I was one of the last people he ever called before he did it. We weren't exactly friends. I didn't see him all that often, but he was a wonderful client, very fun to be around. Guy was a school teacher, students loved him, big burly biker-looking guy. He always told me he wanted to grab a beer with me sometime. If the TOD in the obituary is anything to go off of, the evening he died, he called the store I work at and said he was interested in buying a computer. I told him I'd be more than happy to come down that very upcoming weekend, as he often had difficulty getting time to come down during normal business hours, and told him we could go grab lunch. We had a fun little chat for about 20 minutes. With a rain check on getting lunch. I didn't hear from him ever again. Story 3. CP. Way back in the before times, I worked as an installation and repair tech for a major telecom. Installing DSL was one of the things I did, and while testing the connection to one guy's PC, I stumbled across some very disturbing images. His line was working fine, so I just smiled, told him there was no charge, and left. Called the police first, and then my boss to let him know I might be busy giving a statement for the rest of the day. Dude got severely busted. Story 4. One family I went to visit had a room in their house that was set up for a college kid. Posters, TV, some weights, computer desk, even a half-empty cologne bottle on the desk. I asked them what college their son went to, and they immediately changed the subject, and the mom looked down and away. They said the room is rented out. I later found out their son could not get into the college he wanted, and he has died. They left his room exactly as it last was. I still think about them. Reminds me of a couple who lived down the street from me when I was a kid. It was a small town, and there was a lake in the school forest with a dock in it. Thing is, the water at the end of the dock wasn't that deep, and there were a bunch of rocks in the bottom. Their teenage son fell off it one night. Not sure what exactly happened, but he hit his head on those rocks and died. They did the same thing, left his room exactly as it was when he died. You could see his shoes on the porch when you passed by. Story 5. I'm a CSI. I went to a residential burglary when I used to work at an agency in North Carolina. The homeowners were in their 70s. Their house was your typical grandparents' place with lace doilies everywhere, flowers and photos all over the walls of the entire extended family, a table near his chair with hunting and fishing magazines, a table near her chair with knitting needles and yarn, the whole 9 yards you'd expect to see at Grandma and Grandpa's house. As the lady was showing me around with the officer to tell me what was stolen or moved, I came to a slightly ajar door next to the master bedroom suite. I asked her if anything had been moved in there. She said she wasn't sure since she had called the police the moment they had gotten home from church and realized their house had been broken into. I elbowed open the door. Full-on intimate dungeon room. We're talking intimate swing. Hooks on the ceilings with ropes. Restraints on boards nailed to the wall. Cuffs, paddles, floggers, strap-on harnesses on hooks. Ball gags of various sizes. Video camera on a tripod. You name it. She looked around, put her hand on her chest, and with what seemed a sigh of relief said, "No. Thank you, Laud. It looks like nothing was touched in here. I will never look at an old woman in a Peter Pan collar and flower-patterned dress the same now." Story 6. I better appreciated that a friend of mine was badly depressed when I saw how messy his home was. I wanted to let him know if he needed anything, I'd do my best to help, but I don't want to just say, "Hey, sad ass, let me help." Story 7. Went over to have a post-work smoke sesh. Dude's wife was strung out. Toddler just hanging out, an infant in a playpen. Both unsupervised, dog-free roaming, cigarette butts put out everywhere, and just piles of dog crap all over the house. I dipped immediately instead of smoking. Told him exactly why. Because his house was disgusting and I didn't feel comfortable getting stoned in front of children. Then I reported him to CPS and called my boss to let him know that if coworker didn't show up, it's because I called the cops on him. My boss was pretty chill about it. Homeboy lost his job because of the charges he picked up. They found drugs, weed, popped him for distro, possession, illegal firearm possession, child endangerment, and misuse of welfare. YC benefits. Comment. Almost the same for me. I went to a dealer's house to pick up at 10 a.m. and his kid, 3-year-old, was wandering around outside and the door was locked to the house. They wanted to sleep in and locked her out. I sat and played with her till 12 when a lady walked up and asked me if that was my daughter. I said no, and I was concerned about her treatment. And the lady pulled out a CA's badge and I said perfect. Gave my statement and left. Parents still weren't answering the door at 12:30. Never went back. Story 8. Woman I nannied for had a very messy house, but she always looked so put together in public. She had 6 kids and always said, "Don't judge me. Our house is lived in." Made me realize it was okay not to ruin your life over a perfect image house as long as everyone and everything was functioning. Comment? I have 3 young kids and my husband and I work opposite shifts. The only time we have to really clean is the weekend. Through the week, our house looks like a tornado. Clean underneath the clutter, but definitely chaotic. Then every Saturday morning, we reset the house to start again. We have activities most nights after school, and it's so hard to stay on top of things by myself weekdays. Story 9. Their Labrador in a crate so small it could only turn around with great difficulty. The crate was anchored to the wall because otherwise the dog would thrash around in the crate until it shook and moved across the floor. I asked if the dog had done something wrong to be put in timeout in the crate, like chewing up some shoes? My ex. Friend said no. That's just where the dog lived for the most part. It got out every so often to eat or toilet in the yard, but all other times of day and night it was crated. Their reasoning was that when they let it out the crate, it was too hyper and destructive, probably because it spent its whole life stuck in a tiny ducking box. I argued with the friend and left the house on bad terms. I did phone an animal rights hotline, but was told there wasn't anything they could do. Since the dog was technically provided food, shelter, and decently hygienic conditions, it wasn't illegal to crate them near constantly, even though the org agreed it was neglectful. Story 10. Pills. All over the floor. Every room I went to had random pills on the ground. I picked them up and put them in a Ziploc when I was watching their cats. I let them know and they didn't seem to care. Watched their cats again months later and again found pills all over the place. So bizarre. Story 11. Was dating a girl for a couple of weeks and went to hang out with a couple she was close friends with. We were at their house, hanging out, and having a pretty good time. They seemed pretty cool. The guy starts talking about the iguanas they have and asked if I wanted to see them. They had a separate room for them. We go in there, see the big cages with lizards. They were very impressive. And the big ducking Ku Klux Klan posters on the wall next to them. I made an excuse to leave their home soon after. My girlfriend asked what was wrong and I explained what I saw. She knew and didn't think it was any big deal. It ended that relationship as well. Story 12. We know a family who is very wealthy. One of them is a medical professional, and they have no soap in any bathroom. I have to remember to bring hand sanitizer in my pocket every time we visit. It's bizarre. My father-in-law is like this. A Doctorno soap in any of his bathrooms and a grimy-ass sponge in the kitchen sink. I've never seen that man wash his hands, though I hope he does at work. Story 13. OMG. Yes, I actually have two. The first is the worst to me. I met a girl on a dating app. She's some kind of commander at the local Washington Air Force Base. She lived in a foresty area, and after 4 dates, she invited me back to her house to cook and spend the night. I was excited. I met her at the grocery store. We got food, and the first red flag should have been, we need a new pot to boil pasta in a wood spoon. And then I noticed she had a random box in her back seat with paper bowls from work. I was like, weird, but maybe she doesn't want to do dishes. We are okay, her porch. And I got my hands full with the pot, food, and spoon. She tells me you step inside when she unlocks the door and close the door while she finds a light. I close the door. It's basically pitch black for 5 seconds, minus the moonlight creeping in the window. The light flips on, and the walls move. Literally thousands of bugs, roaches, flies, ants, and other stuff. I look around, and there's fleas jumping visibly across the linoleum. I drop the pot and food, in shock. I look down at my nice suit pants and see tiny bugs on them. I looked up to see what she'd do, and she isn't fussed at all. She said, sorry. My roommate didn't do dishes. There was a stack so high it couldn't open cabinets, caked in days-old food, covered in millions of moving things. She opens the fridge and gets a cider and said, "Want one?" I noped the duck out of there. It was 45-ish outside. I stood at my trunk, took off my clothes, and tossed them in Target bags. And by the time I was in my boxers, with clear flea bites on my legs already, she walked out and was all, "WTF? What are you doing?" And I'm all, "I can't, this is hell." She accused me of being prissy and a pansy. This is the country. You get bugs, IDC. I ended up keeping my clothes outside when the temp got down to 25. I drove 90 miles home, in my undies, and itching nonstop. I never wanted to see her again. I tell this story to all my friends and new people I meet. It's my cautionary tale of, sometimes people can hide what their lives are like when they want to date in too. Yes? Sorry. I got in a minor accident at W home from dinner and forgot about this. Story 2 is below. I met a girl online while playing video games and we became friends. We were 23, 24. She lived 3 blocks from where I grew up, so I was excited to go to my old stomping ground to see what's changed. It was clear from our texts that we were just friends. So when I came to see her, I didn't expect to see her come out in formal dress, like you'd wear to prom. But I can do a fancy dinner, so we grub at a snazzy steakhouse. After dinner, we go to a bar, where she introduces me to her BF, who's a bouncer. Has 6'4", 350, reference, am 6'5", 160 at the time, and is super overly happy and positive. I'm like, huh, cool dude and nice girl, they are happy. I can't wait to go back to the house and play games and drink. We head back to her place. The door opens, and the immediate stench of cat pee slaps my face. Then, there's just grime and dirt everywhere. All of the laundry they own, clean and dirty, is strewn about the living room. And there's a sheet hanging by a clothesline, separating the game area from the rest of the house. She lights 4 sticks of incense and says, "Don't worry, the couch is clean. It sucks having 4 cats and 3 dogs sometimes." And in my head, I'm yelling, "Get out, get out, get out!" But I try to be pleasant, and I sit down. She brings me a beer from the fridge, and it's covered in a sticky film. And within a second, what feels like a pound of cat hair. I stay there for 45 minutes and fake a call that is for work at 12 a.m. But she didn't complain and I left. I said nothing about the dirt and just offered to hang out in person at restaurants or bars. Fast forward, 3 months later, I get a call from the county health inspector or the health office, IDK which one. Turns out BF and GF have foot and mouth disease, or a similar one. It's been 18 years, I don't remember exactly anymore. And it's a drug-resistant strain. I saw him under 21 days ago, so I need to see a health office person and get tested in meds. I was given a bunch of tests. I didn't have it, but it made me really rethink my life choices. Story 14 was cat sitting for my friends while they were out of the country. I walked into their kitchen, and one of them had written, "Don't bully me, I'll coom," with the fridge alphabet magnets. I knew they were funny, but I didn't know they were that funny. Story 15. When my wife used to work for a small company, we would occasionally be voluntold to attend company get-togethers. One of them was at his house. A BBQ. Not that strange, right? Well, what was strange was the 5-foot-wide, professionally painted picture of his wife, completely naked, on a beach in the living room. Story 16. February 2020. I was talking to this lady on Occupid, and we agreed and hang out. She was a bigger lady, not normally my type, but her photos were kinda hot how her hair was and how confident she looked. Well, I drove 40 minutes to her place. I asked if she could meet me outside, but she couldn't. I forgot why, so it took me some time to find her place. When I did and knocked on her door, she answered. She was not at all like her photos. Her hair was not like her photos, and sadly, well, just not like her photos, like the opposite. She had terrible posture and a hump. I looked at her and immediately felt sad. She catfished the hell out of me with those photos, but I wasn't rude or angry. I smiled and gestured to hug. She didn't notice though, because she immediately turned around after opening the door and walked to her couch. When I walked in, I was hit with this overpowering punch of incense burning. Like it changed the pressure in the air, there was just so much burning. I went and sat down on her couch and noticed she had 4 cats. I looked around the room when I sat down and saw all around the place were these large murals that took up the room. My eyes didn't catch this until I sat down. Each mural had photos, paintings, and memorabilia. There was like 5 murals. I just couldn't believe how bizarre this all was. She wasn't talking to me or starting conversation. She opened the door and went right back to get sunken spot on the couch to watch her murder crime show. "So, you got a lot of cats?" And she was like, "Yeah, I had 6. But 2 of them died, and I was looking at the 5 murals of 5 different cats. The math didn't math. I wanted to ask, since this morning, but instead I opted to just ask to leave. She was like, all right, with no expression or anything. I felt bad for her, but yeah, that was the last time I used Occupid. Story 17. My husband's aunt is white and is married to a black man. When you enter their house, there is an entire wall with a painted velvet canvas of a beautiful black woman in her full glory. Boobs, pubic hair, and all. When you sat in the living room, well, she was there. Story 18. Once when I was a kid, I was invited to stay over for dinner at a friend's house. My friend's mother poured a large quantity of ketchup into a cereal bowl, which the entire family all casually dipped their fingers into and licked throughout the meal. Story 19. Super popular. Rich kid in high school. Drove a BMW. Had a huge house, and both of his parents were doctors. Went to a party at his house one night and was absolutely horrified by the filth they lived in. There was dog crap and piss absolutely everywhere in the house, and little chihuahuas running around. Then there were even more dogs stacked on top of each other in crates in the garage. I was so stunned and disgusted I couldn't even have fun and was just horrified for the animals. And him. Because he obviously thought this was all normal. And because he was cool, people weren't saying anything. All I could think was, holy crap, if this is what his house looks like when he knows people are coming over. What the duck does it normally look like? I still feel terrible for those dogs, and wish I had told an adult who could have helped them. Story 20. Neighbor has at least a dozen extremely high-quality hand-painted portraits of President Obama as an African king, high-rolling gangster, Jesus, walking hand-in-hand with Malk, playing basketball on the streets, smoking weed by a burning trash can, and other cray ones. It's been a few years since I saw them. But wow, dude worships Obama and I had no idea. He never speaks a word of politics. He invited me over for dinner and told me all about the artist and how proud he was to have custom pieces by him. He never mentioned anything political. He just spoke about Obama like he was a sports or religious icon. Story 21. I had a roommate once that went away for a bit, and while he was gone, we went in the basement for something and discovered that he and his best friend were making papier-mâché molds of each other's bodies, like dozens of them. Full body casts all over the basement. It was very unsettling. Story 22. One of our city's top high-powered attorneys at the Times house. He had an 18-year-old daughter that I was interested in taking out. I was 19 or 20 at the time. She said I had to meet her dad first. I knew who he was and was a little intimidated. So I drive to the very upscale neighborhood they lived in my little beater car and hung out her and her mom and sister while we waited for him to get home from work. As soon as I walked in the house, there was a framed letter from his high school guidance counselor saying he was a troublemaker and would never amount to anything and would likely end up in jail. Interesting. We then went to the kitchen and hung out until Dad got home. Once he did, we exchanged pleasantries and he said, I hear you're interested in taking my daughter out. I said I was. He said, okay, let's go chat. So he took me further in the house to his office. And this was where I was blown away. He opened the door and it looks like a recording studio with a massive painting of Frank Zappa on a motorcycle on one wall, and the other walls were covered in thousands of vinyl albums and a music studio type stereo and recording system. He apparently was a massive audiophile, and we settled back on a couch and shot the crap while he learned about me. After talking for a bit, he proceeded to open a little box on his desk and pulled out a pre-rolled joint that he proceeded to light and smoke without offering me any, I guess since I was getting ready to take his daughter out. We ended up shooting the crap for a while, and he said he liked me and I could take his daughter out. We wrapped up and we went back to the kitchen, and me and the daughter walked outside double mom and dad. But when he saw my beater car, he said, you can take my daughter out in that though. It doesn't look safe, so take my car. And he handed me the keys to his shiny new BMW. Was so nervous driving that thing that night. Me and the daughter never really worked out much after for a variety of reasons, but every time his name gets brought up in my town or in the news, I always think about that office and how he was nothing like I expected. Story 23. Black mold in the shower. It was our 5th date, I think. He was a nice guy, very smart and kind, and I went to his apartment that he shared with a roommate. The whole place was a pit, but when I saw that shower, I knew I had to call things off. Luckily, the lockdown started a couple days later and we just stopped texting each other. Story 24. I was once a bartender in an affluent area. I would occasionally get invited to after parties with the regulars. More than once, I saw a large home barely furnished, as in multiple rooms, were completely empty and they just lived in maybe 2 rooms of the house. It appears that these people would buy and even rent the homes to put on the look. Story 25. A dude I had a crush on didn't put sheets on his bed. It was so gross and weird. His mattress was all dirty, and I couldn't imagine how it would ever get clean. I couldn't get past it, and it didn't work out. Story 26. My friends moved into an apartment in the complex about 6 months after me. They weren't very organized, but for the 2 years they lived there, they had an Amazon box with a yellow hand towel over it and a 6-plug power strip inside. It was on the floor behind their table, and I nearly tripped on it multiple times, but it was never moved. They, 2 brothers, eventually bought a house, and when I visited, that box was sitting in their living room. I doubt they noticed and just thought it was a box to clean later, but I bet it is still there, 7 years since I visited them last. What makes it weird is the older brother is a massive germaphobe, but they live in what I can only describe as the enclave of the manchild. Story 27. I know a person whose entire house theses Trump. Trump blankets on the couch and chairs, Trump plates and cups, Trump soap, Biden's some Obama toilet paper, and vases with Trump flags everywhere. In the dining room is a large picture framed of Donald and his wife, and the mantel in the living room has several pictures of him framed on easels. Story 28. When my friend and his wife could always afford new shoes outfits and nights out with miscellaneous substances, but their kids slept on a mattress on the floor with no sheets. Like, where are your priorities? Story 29. Their kids didn't have top sheets and their mattresses were gray. The rest of the house was a disaster as well, but to give someone a tour of your home when it looks like a pigsty, that's a no from me, dog. Story 30. Honestly, a big Confederate flag hanging the entire span of their dining room wall. Their business, but I drew the line when they said the Pledge of Allegiance to it. Like, Story 31. My in-laws' place. It's not one thing I saw. It was the whole ducking place. Hoarding like crazy. I wanted to impress them the first time I met them because I was looking to marry my now partner. I was planning a salmon meal with a couple different courses leading to it. I ended up spending 4 hours cleaning and then I could finally prep a meal. It was horrid. And that smell isn't something I won't forget. They seemed nose blind to it. I've never set foot on that property again and never will. Story 32. Pack of chicken breasts in the fridge, except it was fully open and he leaves it there like that and just takes one when he needs to. But raw chicken open in the fridge made me question some things. Story 33. Went over to my best, at the time friend's house. Hadn't been by in a while. She had 2 young children. I think they were both under 5. But she was a stay-at-home mom and her husband worked full-time. I walked in the door and their house was completely trashed. You could barely see the living room floor. There was a big box by the front door, completely filled with dirty diapers. The wood floor was fully ruined. Dishes everywhere. Like, I get 2 kids is a lot of work, but what the duck do you do all day? I'd known her since we were in elementary school. Her mom had 3 kids and their house was basically spotless. And her mom made them help clean, so it wasn't like she had no idea how to clean or grew up around filth. I'd been best friends with this woman for over a decade at the time I was seeing her house like this, and I almost called CPS. That's how bad it was. While I sat on the fence debating whether or not to call CPS, her mother-in-law ended up doing it. CPS was involved in their lives for years after that. It was so sad to watch. Story 34. If I had not known my neighbor when I was growing up was a WW2 vet, and the coat was a war trophy, it would have been the SS officer's jacket he had in his closet. Fresh and never worn, he pulled it off a wagon somewhere in France. Without the context, it would have been a massive red flag. Instead, him and his wife were a sweet couple that were always happy to tell my brother and I stories from the war. He served in Europe. She served in the Pentagon writing letters to fallen soldiers' families. I miss them still 20 plus years after they passed on. Story 35. The dirtiest bathroom I have ever seen. The cleanest anything I've ever seen. Everything had plastic covers to keep it clean. The couch had plastic covers, the rugs, chairs in the kitchen, handrails on the stairs, everything. I was around 9 and went to dinner and watched TV at this kid's house. He asked his mom if we could take the plastic off the couch to watch TV. Mom brought out clean pajamas for us both. Mom explained that everyone gets so dirty in that house. They have to wear pajamas Mom has clean and ready if they want to sit on the couch. When Dad came home and saw the cover off the couch, he got his clean pajamas too and joined us. Weirdest cufing people. The older kids and Dad all worked on cars and engines and were always covered in grease. Story 36. They had a bunch of framed pictures of family members on the wall, and among them was a picture of Ted Bundy, the black and white photo of him grinning at something off camera when he was on trial. It was an old lady's home, and it was otherwise nicely furnished. Not the roughest house I've been to for work, but it definitely had me scratching my head. Story 37. So here's my story. Very long read. We had a family back home that was always kind of off. Very socially awkward, quiet, removed. They had a son who was around 12 at the time of this story, who was always out alone in public. like all the time. It was kind of like he wanted to be anywhere but home. The townsfolk would find him in parks, movie theaters, restaurants, etc. Really late at night by himself at that age. The parents themselves were great people, just kind of weird as duck, in a really unnerving sort of way. They also had various groups of people coming and going at late hours, especially on the weekends. Of course, people talked, ghosts and ghouls and blah blah blah. One day in high school, 2 of my friends and I went to their house to pick up an old car. My buddy was buying it in exchange for labor he'd been doing on the house for 6 months while in high school. The parents weren't home and left the door unlocked so he could get the keys. So ducking, of course, he says, "You guys want to see some crazy crap?" Obviously, young as we were, we did. We went up to the second floor that he did the construction on. He basically turned the 2 bedrooms at the end of the hall into one big room for them. He only saw the interior once, on accident, and it was always locked. Oddly enough, the key ring they left him had the bedroom and garage keys on it. So we go into the room, and holy Jesus, duck, it's a swinger's intimate chamber. Literally every form of intimate-related object you could think of, sans the unicorn from The Witcher, was in this room. 50 kinds of dildos, intimate swings, gimp costumes, BDSM stuff, those tables with the hand and feet straps, furry suits, perfectly placed mirrors, the whole entire latex-filled lot. It was immaculately clean and very well furnished. The lighting was impeccable and reminded me of a 70s disco nightclub. God only knows what went on in there. We were stunned and honestly kind of impressed, seeing as we'd never seen anything like it before except for movies. That's my story. Hope you enjoyed. Story 38. Saw a relative's new house. He showed me around nice house until we got to his bedroom, which was totally decorated with Jesus and Catholic Saint tchotchkes. The kicker was the crucifix tucked into his bed on a pillow. I briefly considered pretending some force was not letting me into his holy room, but I didn't want to be the subject of his prayers or his call to the exorcist. Story 39. I worked on the outside of a house one time, working around a window, and I could see 2 dead hummingbirds sitting in the windowsill inside. Not taxidermy, just laying there dead. Horrible. Story 40. Cat that was restricted to a basement. Granted, the basement was pretty massive and smelled like they cleaned the litter box, and it had food and a water fountain. But still, the poor thing would spend all day meowing at the door. It needed love and companionship. Story 41. Stayed the night at this girl's house and got up early to make some breakfast. I'm riffling, though, the cabinets looking for salt and pepper to add to my eggs. Come to find out, this lady has no spices in her house. None. Not even salt. Like what? Story 42. I started dating a really cute gal. Retro pinup type, perfect makeup, and always put together very well. She invited me over to her place to hang out and watch some movies. She has a 10-year-old son, and he's spending the weekend at grandma's. Modest condo, a bit messy, nothing fancy. We started fooling around on the couch, and she suggested we go upstairs to her bedroom. We go upstairs to her bedroom, and it's completely empty except for a bare mattress on the floor. No sheets, no pillows, no clothes. Not a single thing except the mattress. Yet, she said she had lived there for years and she had a decent job. She proceeded to push me onto the hygiene questionable mattress and hate ducked me into next week in the most angry and aggressive way I've ever had. Intimate. It was seriously mind-blowing. Afterwards, we lay there, cuddled together on this bare mattress like a couple of homeless people on a discarded mattress in a back alley completely buck naked. I big spooned mostly because I was freezing my ass off all night. I should have just bailed, but the intimate was amazing. And she was very attractive. I did eventually buy a bed set for her, and I low-key think she was a bit offended, but I explained that I hated sleeping at her place because I would freeze my ass off at night and I wasn't judging her. We dated about 9 months until she suddenly ghosted me. We had a few mutual friends, and I start to see her wedding photos pop up all over FB. Apparently, she had been engaged to some dude in New York. We are from Canada. For a while, and I was just the side piece until she got married. Just wow. Story 43. Went over to my mother-in-law's home care nurse's 50th birthday. She invited the whole family over. Among others, there were lots of folks. Had to use the bathroom. She had left anal beads out beside her bed. I was like, damn girl, you're saucy. Story 44. I drove nearly 5 hours to meet a guy that I had been talking to online for months. I get to his place, and in the bathroom is an unflushed toilet with a #2 that has very clearly been soaking in there for a while. Noped out of there so fast. Story 45. Went on a date with this smoking hot woman. We instantly hit it off and had a great night. She ended up inviting me back to her condo. And when we sat down in her living room, I noticed a set of binoculars on her side table, so I asked what they were for. Her response was something like, "Sometimes I just like to look into people's places and see what they're up to." Completely weirded me out. Still smashed, though. Story 46. I better appreciated that a friend of mine was badly depressed when I saw how messy his home was. I wanted to let him know if he needed anything, I'd do my best to help, but I don't want to just say, "Hey, sad ass, let me help." A friend of mine did this once. We were just hanging out smoking weed at my place, and there was nowhere to put the bong. So he just gets up without saying a word and starts cleaning. Wasn't about to let someone else clean my house for me, so we both cleaned for a couple hours until the place was close to spotless. This dude is legit my best friend in the whole world. Since then, I've brought up that moment and how much it really meant to me. Love that dude. Everyone deserves a friend like that. I'm glad I have a friend like this. During my downward spiral, my friend would come over. He would always make sure I at least showered, just one thing a day. He would also say, "Hey man, just gotta survive one more, do that for me." He knows my spirals get bad. I had just met this guy, and within 2 months I had tried logging off forever. He came to the hospital, didn't ask why, didn't get angry. We just talked about games. 2 months into knowing me. It's been 10 years in August since I met him, and since my attempt, I was asked to be his best man at his wedding next year. Wouldn't have survived if it wasn't for him. Story 47. When I was in elementary school, there was a teacher who was known for being mean. She often yelled, screamed at students for not listening, breaking rules, doing stupid kid crap. She wasn't married and didn't have kids of her own, so everyone just assumed she wasn't a very nice person in general. Her house was right across from my dentist, and every time we passed by, there was a Christmas tree lit in the window. It didn't matter what time of year. It was always up and lit, and it had been like that since I could remember. I was probably 9 at that point. Anyway, flash forward to summer '09 at Vacation Bible School. She was one of the leaders each summer, and I decided to just ask, why do you always have a Christmas tree up? And well, it turns out she did have a son at one point, a teenager who died tragically right around Christmas. The last thing they had done together was set up that Christmas tree, so she keeps it up as a way of remembering him. She didn't want to mess up the way that they had set it up together, so she never dared to take it down. That conversation completely changed the way I saw her and made me feel so much more compassion toward her when she got worked up over kids not being safe listening. And when my peers would make fun of her or call her mean, I started standing up for her and eventually managed to convince my friends and peers to back off a little. Although I don't think it's acceptable to yell at children as an adult, especially an adult outside of the kid's family, I realized she did it because she wanted kids to be safe and have a shot at growing up well. I've long since moved away from that town, but when I moved to college, she still lived in that house, and you guessed it, the tree was still lit in front of her front window despite it being August. And every time I see a Christmas tree lit up in front of a window, I think of her and of her son. Story 48. I was a farmhand, living on site while I was in my late teens. I accepted the job over the phone and had no way of screening the property. Almost 15 years ago, I was a poor kid and desperately wanted the opportunity of working for this rancher. As soon as I got into the house, my stomach fell. The fridge could have earned a top 5 placing on hoarders. The walls and windows had holes in them, with roots and branches growing well enough inside that some were curled into the carpet and the radiator parts on the back of the fridge. In the laundry room, mushrooms grew in the cracks of the foundation. On one of my final days, upon hearing a commotion in the basement, I discovered a mattress set that I still cannot accurately describe. Imagine it being caught in a flood, pressed by those waters through the panels of a livestock yard, then left to dry in a damp basement. It became the final resting place for some long-disappeared house cat, and I'll never forget the sight of it. She had been decomposing in all the ways for some length of time. So, red flags from the doorway, in every doorway, and the basement. Story 49. I saw my best friend washing her baby's poop on the sink. I've known her for 20 years. I never thought she had bad hygiene before. I went to her place. We were eating at the kitchen, but then her 1-year-old baby pooped in her diaper. My friend then washed the baby's ass on the sink where dishes were still inside. I didn't see my friend washing her hands thoroughly after changing the diaper. I lost all my appetite. I wanted to puke. I don't have a baby. I asked people who are parents about washing a baby's ass on the sink, and they were all shocked to hear it. Now I don't want to visit my friend's house anymore. I don't want her to treat me food. Story 50. I did home visits for students from poverty. Some were refugees, others were here on asylum or farm work programs. Wow, were their houses clean, mopped and dusted daily. Gardens were immaculate. Kitchens well organized. I guess I expected their homes to look like the homes of poor Americans, but nope. They treated their new homes in America like castles and welcomed our visits. Story 51. A married couple, both medical doctors with kids. They had one of those tall, giant outdoor propane heaters in their living room. You know the kind they have for outdoor seating at restaurants? One of those, in their living room, running on propane. No fans, no open windows. I told them they need to knock that crap off. Story 52. Naked photos of people on their walls. It didn't make me think any less of them. I just don't personally have the balls to invite a group of co-workers over knowing they'd walk into that. So I guess if anything, I respect them more now. Story 53. Nothing on the walls at all. Paintings and pictures were on the floor leaning against the wall. I thought perhaps they had just painted, but no, that's just the way it was. It's a very strange thing being in a house with nothing on the walls. Story 54. When I used to mount TVS for a living, there was a small subset of people that were very particular on their TV placement, and yet they were hoarders. Magazines, do ejaculate or cum, seminence, newspapers stacked all around outside of a single walkway. 2 of 3 couch cushions are covered by random obsolete phones. typewriters, etc. Whenever I would move a stack that was in the way of the path to the mounting wall or mounting site, they would flinch and really want to say something, then become almost forlorn. It was as if they had a mental overload or something. After that, they would answer yes to anything and everything that I reasonably suggested regarding their mounting. I always made sure to get it perfect for them. They all know that they're hoarders, to a degree. All they wanted was to have fun splurging for a nice TV and having it put in the perfect spot. They know very well that they can't have dinner parties, family stay, or their kids back in town. Despite their constant chaos, they could at least have their relief, a brand new TV. But even then, the hoarding got in the way. I always felt so bad for those clients. They were always well-meaning people, but the look in their eyes as I left, I will never forget. Just lost. Even after the job was done, saying goodbye was always the worst. I did everything they wanted, but I knew their secret. They always looked so sad, knowing that their secret was out to someone. We both knew I would never tell anyone specifically, but there was an air of uneasiness. Made me view hoarders in so much more of a human light. They are so silently desperate, and it breaks my heart. Story 55. Hospice nurse. Met this lovely couple and immediately fell in love with them. Husband is terminal. Wife and I were sitting at the kitchen table reviewing everything. I am required to ask if there are any weapons in the home. The sweet little wife reaches over and grabs a pistol off the top of her china cabinet. It was on top of one of those Trump Bibles, which was in front of an 8x10 of Trump. She said, "We have this thing. It's our Obama gun." I said, "I'm sorry?" She said, "Oh, you know, in case Obama ever comes around." Story 56. Met a guy at a party who I gave a ride home to. Complete stranger, but I figured I was bored, and he only lived about 10 minutes away. I dropped him off at his house, and the guy seemed really insistent that come in. Really insistent. I asked why. He said he wanted to show me something. I follow him to the backyard where I see a half-sunken shed. I nod and he tells me to follow him. I do, but I have my guard up. I go inside and we're in this dilapidated room. Roaches everywhere. Walls caved in. I asked if I can use his bathroom. He points down the hall, and the bathroom is disgusting. Toilet is half cracked. Shower is half caved in. Mold everywhere, but I see his toothbrush. The guy clearly lives here. I pee and then try to head out. Thing is, I couldn't find him. The room is small, so I'm confused. All of a sudden, I hear him calling my name from somewhere. Turns out it's in between the walls. Dude's room is in between the walls. Bed and everything. I asked him why he brought me here. He told me he wanted to show me how he lived, since obviously he lives in abject poverty and horrible conditions. He wanted to just not feel ashamed over being poor. I can definitely respect his mentality. Last I heard of him on social media, he became a park ranger and lives on the property, I believe. Story 57. A couple weeks ago, I was at a friend's house who lives with her dad. Never noticed it before, but there was a box with a KKK symbol on it and the typical white hooded robed mother ducker. When they weren't looking, I picked it up and opened it. Inside was a very sharp knife with the letters KKK engraved in it and a watch. There was also a letter about initiation and whatnot, and how they aim to protect the weak, fragile, and down and outs. Felt a bit weird after that. Story 58. I lived for a time with a pair of roommates. The wife of the pair was making a huge deal out of not having any room in the kitchen, despite having just moved into the new house, so I couldn't store anything I bought in the kitchen. I thought this was really asterisk annoying, but I didn't push back. In retrospect, this was a huge red flag, and I should have. At some point, I got fed up and opened up one of the cabinets to find it completely full, top to bottom, with mayonnaise jars. It completely filled the space. There must have been several dozen of them. More than a bit confused at this point, I checked the date on one. It had expired years ago. So was the next one, and the next. And so on and so forth, until the roomie caught me with more than half of the jars out of the cabinet. Every single one I checked was expired. She was furious and immediately started shoving them all back into the cabinet because they were just fine and she was going to use them someday. Nothing I said in objection penetrated. It suddenly clicked. The reason the freezer and fridge were full to bursting, yet she wouldn't eat any of it. The reason every nook and cranny was stuffed full of asterisk stuff in the house, yet she didn't use any of it. Asterisk she was hoarding. And it only occurred to me much later after I had moved away that she must have moved all of that expired food asterisk into asterisk the house asterisk with asterisk her. Story 59. Neighbor showed me his house. One room had a huge collection of Sambo dolls. Like the whole wall was blackface, minstrel figurines. I said, "Dude, what the actual hell is this?" Story 60. I used to have some friends that I met through doing animal rescue. They were a little odd, but you get that in that field. They brought their dog over to our house one time and it pissed in our living room and they just watched me clean it up. That should have been my clue. The new owner of their property was evicting them so he could bulldoze the house. I wasn't working at the time, so my brother and I offered to help them pack their things up into a Penske. When we got inside of their tiny two-in house, it was thigh-high with hoard, filthy hoard, covered in mouse droppings and cat piss. I noped the duck out when I saw the tarantula in the laundry room, not a pet, just a loose, wild tarantula in their laundry room. Never again. Story 61. His toilet. Dude had lived there 1 year and I could tell he hadn't cleaned his toilet once. It was caked in brown stains and the seat was falling off. First time I came over and walked toward the bathroom and he said, "It looks rough in there. I didn't get to clean up before you came." He had a bottle of hand sanitizer instead of soap, but at least it was something. I ducked him twice. The 2021 was bad for me. Story 62. I used to walk dogs for an agency in a college town. I never met the people, just the dogs. There was one house that I assumed was owned by a party girl. Walks were always scheduled last minute, and when I got to the house, there would be high heels and club clothes scattered up the stairs. Or the bed would be totally unmade with lingerie on the floor. So in my head, the client was a spoiled grad student who would have us walk her dog after a hard night out. Then one day, I saw a really parking pass sitting on the counter that said transplant physician and allowed her to park basically anywhere at the hospital campus. I checked with my boss who booked all the walks, and she confirmed that this client was a transplant surgeon, maybe a resident, but she would book last minute when she got called into an unscheduled transplant surgery. Story 63. One of my best friend's dad was always really hostile towards me, and I couldn't figure out why. We were hanging out in his garage one day, and I found his dad's pistol that had a swastika scratched on the barrel. Story 64. Rotten food on the counter and trash literally everywhere. I had to hold back gags when we went inside, and he has the balls to judge us on our drinking. MF living in a straight-up garbage can. Story 65. I was freshly 21 and drunk as a skunk with coworkers and some of my boss's friends. Bar's close, we go to the home of boss's friend background info. They all constantly talk crap on this man's wife. The home was very nice in an expensive area and very well decorated. I watched one of my friends make out with him on his couch. Realized that I'm around a bunch of alcoholic adults who have no respect for boundaries, vows, etc. Story 66. My adult friends don't have hand soap in their kitchen, only a small bottle of Dawn Power spray. These are also the same people who never wash their hands after going to the bathroom. They flush and immediately walk out. This is why I don't invite friends over to my house. Story 67. He was a perfectly normal, well-dressed, and successful professional. I went to his house and found hoarder levels of piles of old newspapers and magazines in several rooms and on each stair landing. Story 68. I grew up on a farm, and when I was about 14, a neighbor who lived in a little lot cabin a couple kilometers away asked for some help stacking some boards he was cutting on one of those small sawmills. I arrived early the next day to help, and he said he was just cooking breakfast and would I like some eggs. I had already eaten breakfast, so I said no thanks. We went inside to his cabin, which was nothing more than a bed in the corner and a wood stove, and on an old rough-cut wooden floor. He pulled his fry pan down and picked up an old sock from off the floor in the corner, and then wiped out the pan and dropped the sock back on the floor and started cracking eggs into the pan. I was suddenly glad I hadn't accepted his offer of breakfast. Story 69. Went to hang out at this one guy's house to watch movies once. He was super cute and super funny, and I really wish his house hadn't been so gross. Everything was covered in a layer of dust, cat hair, and trash. He had 2 long-haired cats that he never brushed, so their fur was extremely knotted up, and also had a recliner that only the cat sat in, but didn't tell me until I started noticing the clumps of cat hair on my leggings and shirt. I have a long-haired cat myself and love cats, but I have never seen that amount of cat hair in a home. He also had a tuaf corner in the living room he threw trash into. No trash can or even a bag, just a big pile of trash on the floor. Dirty AF kitchen. Broken ceramic cat bowl for the poor cats with food just spilling out onto the floor. At 30 plus years old. Are those habits just pretty much set in stone? Story 70. I made friends with a girl in college. We got along really well, and she invited me home, and that was when I realized she's old money rich, like filthy rich, and has the entire street she lives at named after her surname. She's still my bestie, and she's so normal and doesn't make a fuss at all when she hangs out with us. She's always so sweet and nice. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw her house. She had a heated pool in her bathroom, and her furniture was so techie, for the lack of a better word. Her parents and entire family are so down to earth and sweet. None of them act privileged or fussy. You'd never realize they're rich unless you knew them personally. Story 71. I grew up in a farm area, and one of our neighbors was a sweet old man who grew grares that we called Uncle Georgie. One day, he and his wife had to leave for a couple weeks, and he offered me $1.20 a day to water his plants for him. His plants turned out to be about 4 dozen intricate bonsai trees, with exact watering instructions for each. And Uncle Georgie turned out to be a former Greek Olympian who'd fled Greece sometime during the junta. I was fairly young at the time. And it didn't just make me look at Uncle Georgie differently, it made me look at everyone differently. That was the moment where it clicked in my young mind that other people were, people. And not, NPCs that popped into existence the day I was born. Story 72. One time I accompanied my buddy to go buy a historical car off a dentist in the next town over. The dentist kept the car in mint condition and had receipts and proof of everything done to the car. He had most of his receipts uploaded in a folder on his computer. In his attempt to pull up the receipts, he somehow pulled up an endless collection of homemade idiot. A lot of pics of him being pegged. He freaked out and tried clicking away, but all he did was scroll through more revealing content. My friend and I were 18 then. At the time, I thought he was just being clumsy about exiting from those files. But as an adult, I almost wonder if he did it on purpose, huh? My friend still bought the car. Story 73. Went to a friend's house to play video games one summer afternoon, and his dog took a crap on the carpet. I said, "Hey, I think your dog just pooped on the floor," and he just kind of shrugged and kept playing. I then started noticing dog turds under the couch and along the walls almost out of sight. And when we were in the kitchen, I saw his backyard was more dog turds than it was grass. Don't think I ever went back to his house after that. Which is a shame because he was a nice guy who just wasn't raised to understand how important it is not to live surrounded by dog crap. Story 74. When I was little, I was at my friend's house and we played hide and seek. I hid under his parents' bed. I was very confused why people would have a severed banana that was so big. Story 75. Some friends of mine got a new place and it was mostly a typical apartment between two guys in their mid-20s. Fairly clean and orderly, with very minimal decorations. The only thing I found strange was some Dawn dish soap in the shower that I noticed while taking a piss. I asked them about it, and it turned out that one of them used it as body wash. He told me, "If it's good enough for penguins covered in oil, it's good enough for me." And I was too stunned by that admission to ask any further questions. Definitely not the strangest or grossest thing in these comments, but it was odd to me. Story 76. Not inside a home, but in a Catholic school computer lab. We found all the computers were connected to the Windows 95 network. Well, we started clicking on items and we found the priest's computer, well, a lot more clicks, and we found a lot of CP. We got scared and exited out. A girl told her mom and her mom alerted the FBI. Lo and behold, the FBI got him for CP and a sting. Story 77. I met a really nice girl at a rec sports league, and we got to know each other a bit. When I went to her place and saw her room, she had a full medieval-style helmet, roadkill bones, upside-down crucifixes, and a mostly black decor. The plot twist is, she actually ended up being super nice, and I've been friends with her for several years now. But initially, I was judging hard. Story 78. Come on, Reddit. Why isn't it ever something nice? Like all of their neighbors took down their fences and share one giant backyard, with a neighborhood library, clubhouse, and a fridge full of organic produce. Story 79. Countless chickens in cages in the living room, dog poop everywhere since they never trained their dog, and no soap in the bathroom. Ducking nasty business. Story 80. I had a rental and went to fix something. The renter had a small whiteboard with a shopping list. On the list, among things like Tupperware and small trash can, was penis pump. Story 81. So cane on the back of the toilet when I used my ex-boyfriend's bathroom at his parents' house. I walked out and his dad and I locked eyes. We never spoke about it, just pretend like I didn't see anything. Story 82. Nazi memorabilia all through a coworker's house while they explained it was just a hobby. He also blames Jewish people for a job he lost once. It was a freak show. Story 83. I go into multiple homes every week. For the most part, people are clean and what I'd call normal. Then we have the people whose animals don't get let outside often enough, or the litter boxes aren't cleaned often enough, or the children have the run of the home and no one cleans for them. That's all normal to some people. We also have a large group of people who collect odd things or old things. They can't let go of the past or of great-grandma's tarnished brass. That's also normal to some. The worst to me are the hoarders. With just a pathway leading to a tight space for one, they expect me to adapt to their living conditions while finding a place to sign multiple do ejaculate or come seminents. Some claim to be remodeling. Others claim to be moving in or out. It's obvious their claims are untrue. But what gets me about these hoarders is that if they aren't sick and in bed on the final days, they are business professionals who walk right next to others, looking tidy and clean. They are doctors and nurses. They are attorneys, accountants, and some even own multiple properties across the country. I've learned that we really don't know a person until we've seen their home.